We're going to talk for about 60 minutes. We'll try to end right at the top of the hour. But then Carol and I will be available. We'll stay on the webinar for another 30 minutes after that. So if you have particular questions, want to stay and submit those to us, we'll take time to really do nothing but questions there for that final 30 minutes. So with that, let me say welcome again, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Carol Aslanian, to tell you about how we did this survey. Carol?
Great. Thanks, Dave. Good to be here with you today. Well, the data are quite current. The 1,500 respondents participated in June, only last month. So we collected all 1,500 respondents in 1 month, June 2012. We have worked with an agency in Colorado for many, many years. They are expert in pulling together national panels that are U.S. Census representative. In fact, we use 250 different characteristics to make up these market-sensitive panels. And out of a set of 2 or 3 million people, we invited by email individuals to participate in the survey if they could meet the following qualifications. Number 1, they had to be 18 years of age and older. Number 2, they had to have a minimum of a high school degree or its equivalent. And most important, they had to be recently enrolled, currently enrolled, or have firm plans to enroll in a fully online undergraduate or graduate degree, certificate, or licensure program. Now, this technique, we say, is built on years of market research that our staff has taken control of in terms of looking at demand and not need. We don't ask people what they would like to do in the far future if they could, with all kinds of obstacles taken away. No, we talk to actual buyers, and in this case, we talk to those within the set of 2 to 3 to 4 million candidates, only those who had spent time in a fully online program. So they knew what they bought, they could tell us where they went, what they did, why they went to certain places and not others. They were actual buyers, and I believe the percentage of those who said, I plan to do it in the next year, I have firm plans, was about 25%. So the sample was made up primarily of people who had bought this product that we're all talking about today, online degrees or certificates. Let me move on now to talk to you a little bit about the characteristics of the sample. What did we end up with? And the one good thing about the work that Aslanian Market Research has done over the last 20 or 30 years is that we have a body of information to compare things to. So we know of the 30 or 40 studies we've done in the last year or two, what the makeup of this population tends to look at. So when we went on a national basis, we had some base of reference. For example, it is no surprise to most of you, probably, that this market is made up of about 70% female. In most of our studies of adult students, it runs from 65 to 75% female, so this is right in tune with those in fully online degrees or certificates. They were primarily female. Next, about a third of the market is Caucasian, which is also not a surprise. Since this population tends to be about 75% older than younger, we all know that in adult programs we tend to have an imbalance of more Caucasians than minority populations, and it's proved true here in the ethnic diversity. 2 out of 3 fully online learners is a Caucasian male or female, and the remainder are made up of other groups, primarily African American at 20%, and then Asian and Hispanic. Next, what we were not too surprised at, but probably some of you will be astonished at, is that about a quarter of our population was under the age of 25. Why is this true? Well, 2/3 of them, you'll see later, are learning at a traditional institution. Many community colleges in this country are offering full-fledged degree programs online. Age does not determine the way we learn anymore. So we do, and I think this is something that many of our institutions have rather ignored, and that 25 or 24% of online learners are probably enrolling in our institutions without much direct marketing from us all. Yes, 1 out of 4 fully online learners is an individual under the age of 25. Slightly more, of course, so the proportion is higher among undergraduates than graduates. Then if you look at the age group under 29 or under, if you add up those two percentages, you'll see that about 40% of this population is under the age of 30. My staff and I have been noticing this in recent surveys in regional areas across the country, and what we say to ourselves are people as adults are going back to school earlier than they once had planned to do. I think 10, 15 years ago we would have said mid-30s was a prominent age, but now they're getting younger. As you all know, half of all traditional students do not finish college in 6 years. They get to be 26, 27, 28, and they say to themselves, I can't make it in this occupation, I want a new career, and I can't do it without finishing that credential. So we find in our other studies along here that they're coming back a little bit earlier than we had expected. The market drops off after 45 to about 30%. But then again, we might say to ourselves, what can we offer to those people 45 and older that want to continue to make gainful employment? They're not going to retire at an early age, they can't afford to, and so on and so forth. The median age being across the undergraduates and graduates combined is 31. Footnote, we do have data according to undergraduate and graduate population, and we can provide that if necessary later. They are not the first necessarily in their family to attend college, only about a third. That's an impressive third, and in our marketing and recruitment, we need to pay attention to that. Their income, the median total family income this is, I think the slide could be a little bit clearer. It's household family income is about $66,000. This is not individual income. We asked about total household income. Next, and this may be of a little surprise to you, but it isn't to us. We've seen this in recent surveys. Their highest level of education, what did they bring to bear as entering undergraduate fully online programs? As you can see, about 90% have been to post-education prior to enrolling in an online program, which also means later, and you'll see that they do bring credits to bear. But this is not a population that is new to higher education. Let's look at the portion that has a bachelor's degree or better. That's 23, and that's at the undergraduate level. You might say to yourself, who are these people coming back for bachelor's degrees online when they already have one? Well, you all know the answer to that. They may have majored in the humanities or government or political science, and now they're coming back for business, criminal justice, or the health professions. They're redoing their undergraduate credentials. Some of them bring 3 or 4 years of college. They're bringing lots of credit. They want to be transferred and valued by their online institutions. So this is kind of a very savvy market. They bring to bear prior years in higher education. They want to complete their certificates or degrees online. Among the graduate students, why would we have 35% or so with a master's degree or better? Well, for one reason, educators, for example, teachers, administrators can't stop learning. They keep learning on that career ladder, and they need to get credentials to move ahead. So one thing that's very important to realize in the online education market is that these people have been in graduate market study, and they're coming online to finish what they began or to get extra credentials, maybe a lot of certificates, so that they can move up the career ladder. How do they pay for their courses? A varied amount, very number of different ways they do. Student loans and other financial aid, quite prominent, but look at that 30% who use personal funds only. These are students who don't come needing federal aid, don't come needing institutional grants, but about 30% can pay their own way, and then another 21% use personal funds and student loans. So there's a lot to examine here. We can discuss this more later. I think it needs more analysis, but a good portion of these people pay their own way, and some others need the financial assistance that lots of you are able to describe and offer them.
Carol,
Employment status. I'd like to, yes?
we just have a question that's come from Laura Little from West Virginia. Is there descriptive data of rural versus urban versus suburban respondents?
Good question. No, we did not ask that. We did not ask that question, and probably if we do this yearly, that will be certainly a question we can ask.
And we have one more question. Does the course payment method include the GI Bill as well?
The GI Bill?
As a method of payment?
Yes, it would. It'd be in the government sector, financial aid. It would be in financial aid. I don't know if we have that broken down. I can check. Yeah, we did not break it down by military aid.
Okay, great.
Okay. If you look at employment status, and you know, we do have this broken down by undergraduate and graduate. I'd like to say, I'll bring you some data from the undergraduate I do remember. You know, if 55% are working full-time, another 35% are working part-time. So these people have more time for full-time study than you might have expected. Even in this chart, which combines the undergraduate and graduates, not everybody is working full-time. So it leaves more room for various formats of instruction, intensity of courses taken, and so on and so forth. Now, those are the primary demographics. There's much more in the report, but I just want to give you a flavor now of who we're listening to as we report on their preferences and practices. And now I'll turn it back to Dave.
Thanks, Carol. Most of the publicity, the articles that we read about online education deal with for-profit institutions. But when you look at the slide here, 2/3 of these students are enrolling in private nonprofit or public institutions. And I think there's a reason for that. The for-profit institutions tend to be large, and University of Phoenix, for example, is far and away the largest single provider of students in this sample. Almost 15% of the students were planning to or have enrolled at the University of Phoenix. And then you have other large online for-profit institutions like DeVry and Kaplan and Capella, Walden, and so forth. There tends to be a small number but large enrollments of those institutions. Whereas on the private nonprofit side, the public institutions, there are a lot more of them, but they all tend to have smaller enrollments. And so sometimes it feels like the for-profits get most of the attention in the press, but really 2/3 of these students are attending nonprofit and public institutions. There's a further issue here about the kind of credentials that these students are looking for that could be a bit of a surprise. Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Can we go back one slide? I'm sorry, I was trying to get the screen back on. Just want to make one point of this. These data do not differ from what EduVentures has been distributing for the last year or two. This 1/3 for-profit, 2/3 not-for-profit. So we're not surprised at that at all. As some people may be, but you know, this kind of proportion has been documented in the last year or two by EduVentures and BMO Capital.
Good. So moving on to intended credential, 73% are pursuing degrees, but we were a bit surprised, I was personally, at the number of students that are interested in or enrolled in shorter programs, certificates or licensure programs. Close to 30% of these students. And when we looked at this data a little bit more closely by the type of institution that they were attending, and some interesting differences show up here on this slide. At the undergraduate level, the gold bars are the for-profit institutions, 69% are in degree programs, but certificates and licensure combined is 31% of their programs, or their students, and there's major difference with the private institutions, where they're predominantly degrees and quite a few less students or percentages less in terms of certificates and licensure. I think this represents an opportunity for the independents and potentially the public institutions. My assumption is that more students in the for-profit sector are enrolling in certificate shorter programs because more are offered. If you look at the catalogs of the different institutions, I think you'll find that the for-profits tend to offer a lot more certificates, so they get bigger percentages of students there. And there could be an opportunity for especially the independent colleges, if you work in that sector, to consider adding certificates or portions of degrees. For example, I was recently at one of our partner institutions at an event that was held for prospective students. I had a chance to visit with a young woman who had 2 children, typical kind of demographic, in her early 30s, and she was interested in this institution. She had a diploma in accounting, and she was contemplating enrolling, but she was hesitant about a full degree. She wasn't sure if she could commit to a full bachelor's degree, that length of time, that amount of money, and so forth. But a certificate in accounting could have been a really good option for her if this institution had it available, where she could maybe take 4 courses, improve her skills for the job that she currently had, and then if that works well, move on into the full degree program. So for students like this that aren't sure about committing to the full degree, and certificate could be very helpful, or as you'll see in the data later about why students enroll in colleges, careers are a key focus here, and some people may just want to improve a particular skill to get an advancement or a change of position in their organization. So they need a few courses, a certificate, or a license that helps them do that. So key concept to think about in how you mix your programs. This is another division of that particular slide, or the desired credential that people are looking for. Here, the associate's and bachelor's degrees comprise the undergrad students, and the master's and professional or doctorates, the grad students. But again, you see pretty good diversity here. We assume that the white bar, which is the public institutions, are primarily community colleges. But again, a big difference between the for-profits and the private sector, independent sector, in associate degrees. I would guess that if you look at 4-year public universities as well, there'd be very few students enrolling in associate degree programs, primarily because they're not offered. But there's an opportunity here, it appears to me, to offer associate degrees as a portion of a bachelor's program that may be, again, be attractive to students like the one I just mentioned, who is hesitant about enrolling in a full bachelor's program, but may do the associates, which is half the commitment in terms of time and money. So these differences were interesting to highlight.
Dave? We have a few questions from the audience.
Sure.
Dorothy has a question. When you look at who comes for certificate, diploma, and licensure programs, do you have a sense if they have degrees or not, or at what level, undergraduate or graduate?
You know, we didn't address that in this report, but that's data that we could go back, I believe, and address that question.
Yeah, we could do a crosstab on that. We could do that. My guess is that, because we do see that in our other studies, given the proportion of distribution, it's about 15 to 20% of the market now over the age of 25 are seeking certificates, and they do tend to have higher credentials when they come back. That is, they'll come back maybe for a graduate certificate after they have their master's degree.
Good question, and if any of you folks are interested in particular questions like this, you can communicate with Carol and I, or I, after the webinar, and we can go offline and talk with you about how we may help you get that information.
And Dave, one last question, because I know our time is sensitive. Colleen Murphy is asking what are the certificates or stackable credentials that are in most demand?
The data for certificates parallels the data I'm going to show you here about field of study. Business is the dominant area, and then it breaks down into areas such as health sciences, social sciences, and so forth. And again, Carol, I would defer to you. Do we have particular certificates or just the field of study?
The certificates in education and health professions are the two major areas.
Okay. Let me move on to this next slide, field of study. When we look at all of the programs across undergrad and grad, 34% of the students are interested in a program in business. That could be finance or accounting or general business administration, but in the general discipline of business. So it's far and away the largest field. It's double ones that are in second place. And as I mentioned, second place would be social sciences, health sciences, STEM fields. This is a breakdown more specifically of the top 10 degree choices for each of the areas undergrad and grad. You can see there's a lot of overlap. And again, business is in first place in both categories, and then the undergrad is accounting second, business finance is fourth, so that combined group is over 30% of the population. You can see the list as they break down there. One of the questions, again, we typically get is, which programs should we offer if we're going to develop online programs? And the short answer is follow this list. I mean, these are the major areas that people are interested in. There may be some regional differences, but I doubt if they're significant. And this is a good place for any institution to begin with these most commonly sought after degrees and programs at either level. I have in my experience seen institutions that have unique programs, niche programs. For example, some of the partners that we work with at Learning House have degrees in mining or sign language or English as a second language or speech pathology. These won't show up on this list of top 10 or probably even the top 30 or 40, but they're good programs for some institutions that have strong academic reputations and programs in those fields. There's a need for them, but they're not going to be in high demand across every region of the country, but they work well. So a good strategy is to think about this list of commonly desired degrees, and also look at particular individual strengths of the institution where there may be a niche that has a broader appeal.
I'd like to add a comment there. It has come up about whether or not an institution who's beginning to go more deeply into online education has to offer the core topics with, say, the health professions and business. And the answer here would be you better set a base of operation. If you want some kind of core enrollment in online education, you do have to sort of offer these bread and butter accounts. They need to be able to be offered so that you can do other things. Recently, we had an institution that wanted to offer a certificate graduate program in gerontology, and another institution that wanted to offer an online certificate in sustainability. Well, it just so happens that those two institutions have good track records and are known for these two different fields, so it made a lot of sense, since in their own little geographical areas they wouldn't get enough participants, that if they went nationwide and went online, these boutique topics could work. But then again, if you're going to run an online operation, you might say to run these boutique topics, we also have to run the bread and butter accounts as well.
Another one of the questions dealt with the less positive features. I want to see if I didn't skip a slide there. Less positive features of online education. Interesting to note that these students are concerned about interaction. It's a natural sequence or point of view. People that are going on online programs are concerned about interaction with other students. And number two, 24% of the people were concerned about contact with their instructors. And I think that the good news in this is that these are things that institutions can directly address or do something about. For example, you can have group projects or form study groups in classes, use social media tools to get students interacting with one another. On the instructor side, setting expectations for faculty participation in online courses, I think, is critical, both in terms of the quantity and the quality of the participation. If a faculty member is only in their class one day a week, they're going to miss a lot of the questions and comments that students have, and if a student makes an error or comes up with a concept that's inappropriate, it could take a long time before that gets corrected if they're in the class infrequently. A good rule of thumb is 4 or 5 days a week would be the minimum expectation for faculty members to participate in the class discussion board or to check email and respond to students. But that's frequently enough to answer questions, keep people moving. And in terms of quality, sometimes you'll see faculty members that give a response to a student like "good job" or "nice work." And those are not helpful comments. The real genius of the online classroom is the discussion forum where faculty members can probe and prod and stimulate and query students to think deeper and extend their learning. So the kind of questions and comments that faculty make are critical. So a good opportunity here is to set clear expectations for faculty and then to provide appropriate training and developmental activities so they can be good at what they do, and you can address one of these key concerns. Factors in choosing a school are an interesting list. This is just the top half of the list. It's where more than 50% of the students said this was a key factor in them choosing a school. There are other, the list keeps going and going on down to features that have fewer and fewer students. So you can glean a lot of information from this particular table in the report. Of course, reputation and price are the two critical factors. That comes up over and over again. And as we do further research in this field, our goal is to do this survey annually. We would like to dig down into what are the factors that determine reputation and try to tease that out a little bit. Or for example, the same thing about career placement. 56% of the students are concerned about career placement. And we need to know more about what those ideas are. Is it just career services in terms of help writing a resume, or is it truly placement service where there's vacancy notices and so forth? In a later slide, we'll talk about location. These students are interested primarily in nearby institutions, and you do have the opportunity in that case to provide a pretty robust career placement service. I think there's a great opportunity here for institutions to actually calculate their placement rate and develop a clear, concise definition that you can use year after year to show what your placement rates really are, and that could be an important selling point for students.
One other thing to point out here, you can see second up from the bottom is faculty that teach part-time and are practitioners in their field. Lower down on the list are faculty that are full-time and are tenured in their field. And you can see that, and this is consistent with our other data from other studies, that they rather have practitioners who are part-time than tenured that are full-time. So they really want people who know their profession. And you probably already understand that if you've run adult programs that this pattern is relatively strong among them as well.
Moving on, this is an interesting subpoint that most of these students are bringing transfer credit with them. Only 18% have no credits, and over 45% are bringing more than 30 credits with them. So it's important that institutions are transfer credit friendly. And it's important to understand, I think, what that means, though. Many institutions have a policy that a certain minimum number of credits must be taken from that institution in order to earn the degree. The low end would be 25%, the high end would be 50%. But just saying that you can bring as much as 75% transfer credit does not make an institution transfer student friendly. The real key is the degree plan itself and the program of study that provides room for those transfer credits to fit in. Most of you would know the old adage about 30% of the program in an undergraduate level would be in the major, 30% in gen ed, and 30% open electives. I think it holds true in this case. 30% of those degree plans should be open electives where any of these transfer credits could fit in. And then within the Gen Ed and the major area, again, a significant portion, maybe 30% of those credits, should it also be electives within the field or electives within Gen Ed to make it really easy for these people to transfer credits in. A good data point to look up at your institution is what percentage of transfer credits actually get accepted and applied to a degree plan. And then there's also considerations for experiential credit, credit by exam, that would make an institution really transfer student friendly. Moving on, another interesting subpoint here about length of courses. These students typically don't want a traditional 15 or 16-week semester. You can see the largest choice here is 6 to 8 weeks. It's becoming more and more of a norm in my experience for institutions to use the 8-week term, which is half of a semester. It's a good term length because you can run 6 terms a year, use 48 weeks out of the 52, so it's pretty efficient, and these students can keep moving through. One of the considerations, though, here to keep in mind when you determine term length is the number of credits students want to earn. As Carol mentioned, a number of these students are not working full-time, so they want to be full-time college students. And a full-time student in an 8-week term would have to take 2 classes every 8 weeks, which is a lot of time to earn the credits necessary. So considerations about term length and the class schedule really impact full-time and part-time students as well. I'm going to turn it over to Carol at this point.
I think we're missing location.
Hey,
yeah.
Dave, can I ask a quick question from the audience?
Sure, let's hear it.
It's kind of backing up a little bit. I've been holding a lot of questions to the end because, in the interest of time. But
okay.
Lori Pendleton, she, when you're talking about the importance of price, she brings up a good question in that she's saying the University of Phoenix, Kaplan, DeVry, Post pull in an awful lot of students. Despite the price, it just seems inconsistent what they say is important versus what they choose. And what's your comment on that?
Yeah, that's a really good observation, great observation. The for-profits tend to be higher priced because of an artifact called the 90-10 rule, and they have to keep their prices high enough to have the students pay something out of pocket typically. Well, there's obviously other considerations besides price. If an institution is really good at marketing, if they have strong enrollment management practices, where they respond quickly to students, and if they offer a full array of programs, like I noted earlier, the for-profits tend to offer more certificate programs and 2-year degrees, and they tend to have a wide variety of programs within their program offerings. So there are a lot of other factors with that. Having said that, though, I think institutions in the public sector and the nonprofit that don't have to worry about the 90-10 rule can compete on price, and price is a really critical issue for these students. So it's a mixture of things, obviously, but I think as the traditional institutions become more adept at marketing, more adept at enrollment management, responding to students, doing 8-week terms or shorter courses, being transfer credit friendly, all these features that show up as issues for adult students, that's all part of the package, but price is an area where you can compete pretty well. I forget to mention and thanks for the reminder, Carol, about location. 80% of these students live within 100 miles of the college that they're attending or are interested in, and over half live within 50 miles. So location is critical for these students. I think it contributes to the notion of reputation and brand, that these students know an institution, they hear about it. The woman I mentioned earlier that I met at an event last week had a cousin that attended this institution. So it's a known quantity, it's a real institution, she feels good about it. So location is part of that as well, and it contributes to the reputation of the institution. If it's been around for a long time and it's known in the area, that's an important factor too, that for an institution to use in this whole communication mix. And with that, let me turn it over to Carol, who's going to go into the data about communication and where these students go for information, so you know how to contact them.
Before I delve into motivation, let me just add a point on the pricing issue and the question about the University of Phoenix. You do have to remember that the University of Phoenix does enroll at the undergraduate level a large proportion of lower income students, a large proportion of minority students. Therefore, and they do an excellent job in matching that population to financial aid opportunities that are available for that population. Therefore, the cost can be covered by the financial aid that is eligible to these people because of their very low income levels. So that's another reason. Let me move on to motivation, which is really tied to this next table as well with key trigger events. Most of you are probably too young to remember a report we did at the College Board in the early 80s called Americans in Transitions, Life Changes as Reasons for Adult Learning. And that's when we were all delving into the literature to find out if we could figure out why so many of these people over the age of 25 are coming back to college. So with the Exxon Education Foundation assistance, the College Board and I and others looked to examining what brought adults back to school when they decided to enroll. So it was both the reason and the timing. And we analyzed, thousands of people's responses back then to find out what was the driving reason, the motivation, and we categorized those reasons according to the 7 life areas from career, family, and so forth. And we say in this current report, well, some things never change. The role of careers in pushing people back to school is still dominant. And I can remember writing the paragraph in 1980 that said, well, let me tell you why adults were coming in larger numbers in the 70s. Life was changing. Societal trends were volatile. It was a turbulent era. And if I said that in about the 1970s, and the turbulence and the changes in one's career was paramount, and one of the reasons that drove them back in the late 70s and early 80s is exactly why they're there for the next 30 years. Our jobs don't stay still, the economy keeps changing, and education is the vehicle to get the competencies you need to move on with your careers. So it is no surprise, once again, that 90% of the reasons they go back to school, and I think it was 84% back in 1980. The reason they go back is because of jobs, jobs, jobs. It's not because of that beautiful diploma they're holding in their hand as they march across the stage and that you portray in your catalogs and so forth. It's really the ability to walk into an office building, to sit at a computer and do the work that has to be done, to advance, to get salary increases, and so on and so forth. So there is no other more important message in your marketing, in your outreach, then education is the vehicle to success in making a transition in your career lives. Now, moving on, it's the reason for learning is always accompanied, we said in that earlier research, by a trigger event. Many people come to your campus will say, I've always wanted to be an accountant, I've always wanted to be a nurse, I've always wanted to be this, I've always wanted to be that, I always wanted to move up in the hierarchy in my organization. But what makes her decide to come back to Drury University in the fall of 2013 or to the College of Westchester in the spring of 2013? Why then and why not earlier? There's always an event that sets the timing for learning. And I remember our readers would say back then, if we knew these trigger events, we'd know right where to go to find them. And one of the primary locations back then was divorce court. Divorce was a major trigger in getting women back to school in the 70s and 80s. But in our recent study, in June 2012, the major reason was to move ahead, either in your income or your status in your occupation. To qualify for promotion or salary increase was the trigger event that pushed 1/3 of these people to online education. Combined with that, the state of the economy, another workforce influence, and loss of job or a family member loss of job. So if you add those 3 economic reasons, you get to about, 33, 43, 53, over about 2/3. 2/3 of the triggers that push an adult back to online education come from their work economy lives. Another interesting thing, though, is that third factor, you reached a milestone age. You know that when people turn 30 or 40 or 50, they say, okay, I'm now 40, what am I going to do next? Or I'm 50, I've got to find that final transition in my life so that I can make it to that next occupation that I'll hold for probably another 20 years. So that was an important factor as well. So when you're marketing and recruiting, we say, you know, look at the events in people's lives that say it's time to learn. Most of them will come from their job and career lives and the status of the economy. And that's what we're learning more and more in the way we develop our campaigns and marketing messages. Moving on, it's your website, it's your website, it's your website. Nothing could be more important. That's where most people go to find out about a specific institution and its ability to offer what they need to get that promotion, to get that salary increase. Next, most often, they go to an internet search engine. MBA they'll type up on Google and find out where they can find the program that best fits their needs. And the third internet source would be college search sites like eLearners, Earn My Degree, gradschools.com, Classes USA, and so forth. So they are, well, of course, if they're going to go into online education, we can assume they know how to traverse the internet, and that's exactly what they do. There's nothing more important than what your website says to them. Moving on. We have a listing here of both electronic and offline advertising techniques, and we say to them, what is the most effective way for you to learn about colleges and programs that might meet your needs? And of course, there's nothing like friends or family and word of mouth. And lots of people just turn to someone they know. How about that institution down the street? Or what about that online national institution? Second, they go to their employer, because don't forget, most of the reasons their learning has to deal with their employment or potential employment, and they want to make sure that the employer is in tune with what they're doing. In a recent study we did for NYU and the city of New York with the Fortune 500, we interviewed 100 of the Fortune 500, and 99 of the 100 endorsed online education and made tuition reimbursement opportunities certainly able to be applied to online learning. And we just supply some other data that, you know, officials in major companies have accepted online education, so on and so forth. And that's very, very important to people who are going to get their degrees online. I think the mass media techniques that are here and, you know, the TV, the radio, you'll see are important as well for visibility and for reputation building. But the hierarchy here is one of the messages, you make good and satisfied customers with friends or family, and you'll get others like them to come in because of word of mouth. And this list goes on till the next site, where it's the lesser of the most effective ways. Ads, least effective in their opinion, would be ads to cell phones, text messages, and so on and so forth. So if you had $100 to spend on marketing, start on the first page and work your way down. Now, what's the most important message on your website? It's exactly what you all try to hide, your tuition and fees. That's what they look for first, and believe me, I've looked at more websites in my day, and that's what you can't find on most websites easily. And remember that after reputation, tuition and fees was the most important variable in selecting an institution. So you'll see we have some advice later on. Make it clear, make it visible, and show them how they can pay for it. And then, of course, they got to know you're offering the right thing. At the right major or program, and your admission requirements, and then what are the courses I need to take in the program, very important. We're doing a study right now for a major for-profit institution that is looking in the informatics area, and the types of courses they offer are extremely important, and we can tell there are variances in opinions among the population we're testing out. Moving on. Social networking profiles, well, they are connected. 83% have a profile on Facebook. While we still don't quite understand, in my opinion, and based on what we've looked over, and across the nation, we don't know how to use those networking opportunities for marketing. They certainly are viable given the participation by this particular population. And it's not that they're on Facebook, it's that they're on Facebook every day. Next, they do read the newspaper, and when they do, it's online. They do listen to the radio, and it's on local stations, particularly in driving communities. And if they're going to watch television, it's local stations and cable. Moving on. How much time do they spend online in a given week, not towards study? Okay? So about a quarter spend under 25, but the median number of hours a week they spend would be about 32 hours a week. You divide that by 7, that's about 4 or 5 hours a day. That's quite a bit. So what are the sites they visit most often? They're listed to you on the right of that chart. This and other more detailed information are in the report. We're trying to give you a summary. So let me try to summarize, and Dave, chime in when you want, what I think the key takeaways here are. First of all, I want to say, remember, these data represent a national template. This is a national study. It describes the 50 states and the residents in those 50 states, or 47 that participated in this study. And the one slide that you didn't see, which was really critical, was that 2/3 of these people study with an institution in their region. So if you have a region, you might want to say, what are the people in our region looking for, and how is it matched to what we can offer, and what should we move on first, and what online or offline programs are they watching, and so on and so forth. So this is a national template for you, and for example, if you're in the state of New Hampshire, you could say to yourself, what do people look like and what do they want when they live in the New England region versus the Southeast versus the Northwest? So this template shows you what the parameters are, and then you've got to say to yourself, what will I do in Portland, Maine to expand my online program? Okay, number one, very important, this is an age-free educational format. You know, Dave and I, to be truthful, right, Dave, we said, oh my goodness, 25% or so under 25. How can that be? You have to be an adult student to be an online learner. No way. We called some of our best friends and some of the biggest institutions in the country, and lo and behold, there's a consistency in that figure of under 25. So once upon a time, we would put those people who are older and adults in those separate buildings down the street and call it continuing ed or extension or something like that. But, you know, online education doesn't have those kinds of limitations. It is something for everybody.
Yeah, Carol, this is Dave. Interesting point there. Some of the institutions, especially in the for-profit sector, used to restrict ages. Nobody below the age of 24 could enroll. Most of them have dropped those policies now, but it's interesting to see this migration towards younger students and how that will impact the overall attendance-taking patterns of students is yet to be seen, but it looks like it's moving lower. Let me just comment while I've got the mic here on that second bullet. You know, when you think about the for-profits representing about 1/3 of these online students, the last numbers I've seen indicate that they enroll about 12 to 13% of all college students. So in many ways, the for-profits are overrepresented in the online student body. And again, that discrepancy in numbers, I think, presents an opportunity for the publics and the nonprofits that there's a lot of territory out there, a lot of students interested in this, and you would expect the percentages to be more in line with the overall population. So I think there's a basic message here that there's an opportunity for these institutions that have not done so yet to develop online programs.
Right. And also back on age, I think that younger number is bound to increase because as we produce more and more high school graduates that are having lots of their courses online now. In fact, there are several states that require you to take at least one online course before you graduate from high school. And as if you look at your children and grandchildren and know how technologically astute they are becoming, it's not, and the fact that we have 6.5 million students in American colleges taking one or more online courses, what's going to happen when they go to graduate school in about 4 or 5 years? Or what's going to happen when that next population of high school students get to undergraduate programs? So it's no surprise that the age is lowering, and that that'll probably be on a steady pattern of behavior. Going to the third bullet, more alike than different. We did a cross-tab, and we sat here and we pointed out a couple. I think the for-profits have more minority students and more lesser income students. But other than that, they seek degrees and credentials in the same proportion. Their reasoning is in the same domain, and so forth. And we explain that in the full report. We looked hard for contrast and didn't find many. That fourth bullet, I'd like to point out those certificates over and over again, because it certainly is a growth market. Those stackable certificates that people can come back for and add on ultimately for a degree, or maybe not. Or people who already have their graduate programs just want certificates of performance, of competency. So I think that's an area that will certainly grow in importance. And finally, another clue to you all, and don't ignore those prior credits. That's money to the participant. They want credit for it. They want a transfer. Be inviting. Put it on your home page. If 90% are coming back with some credit, act friendly to them, because that's another way of compensating for prices that might be more challenging to them. So, moving on to the next. Nearby campus-based, I think the report does say that most online students enroll in institutions within 100 miles. I think it's, what is it, 2/3 or 70%, or around 75% in that domain, around 75%. And it's a campus or a service center, by the way, in the report we say, not necessarily a campus full location. As you know, University of Phoenix has 250 sites across the country, some campuses, some service centers. Strayer does, and now Northeastern University, who I think is with us today, they're setting up campuses in major metropolitan areas across the country. Understanding this top bullet, that proximity is very important to these people. Probably psychologically, that there's something nearby that they can turn to if they need help, but also the employers know the institutions that are nearby, and that may make a difference in their work lives. As Dave pointed out earlier, the shorter the better. We want compressed courses at a cost we can afford, with an institution that has a good reputation. And finally, I think we're not finally yet, but the website. Some of you have geared your website to traditional age students studying on campus full-time, when if you're entering the online market, we've got to have more variance. Because your websites are very important. If they can't find the information they want within 3 clicks, they'll run someplace else. Moving to the next.
Yeah, Carol, that's the final.
Yeah,
that's the final takeaway. I would make a note too that on the websites, when you think about traditional websites, as you visit them, you get information about athletic teams and events on campus and so forth. I think that that's important for these online students that are nearby that want to see it's, quote, a real institution that has these activities going on, but they need their own real estate and their own messaging too to attract them to enroll at that particular institution. So our time's about up here. We appreciate your attentiveness. Just a reminder that the Learning House hosts a webinar like this each month. We have coming up in August assessment for continuous improvement, and one about financial aid for non-traditional programs. So we're going to end the official, quote, presentation at this point, but as I said earlier, Carol and I are happy to stick around for the next 30 minutes or so. If some of you have questions,
Dave,
if you'd like
we
to
have
do
a
that.
whole, excuse me, Dave, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
We have a whole list of questions that I've been postponing to the end in the interest of time, so maybe I'll just start with those questions if that's okay.
Yep. Let's fire away.
Okay, so Dorothy had a question in terms of payment methods. If only 4% received support solely from their employer, do you have any sense of employer support for these initiatives and why? Perhaps because they are trying to change fields, but just wondering if it's more than like, I'm assuming from Dorothy that she feels like this is pretty low.
I think, I'll take a stab and then Carol can respond. I think that the 4% would be fully paid, and more companies have been through difficult economic times, so they may have reduced or curtailed their employee tuition reimbursement benefit. And so it's maybe paying a portion or part of it, but not the full amount.
Also, I think nationwide, it's only 5% of employees ever use tuition reimbursement benefits. That's why so many employers like to call it a benefit, because there's only 5% usage. In terms of employer endorsement of online education, I think every year we're getting closer and closer to fuller endorsement. There was a report by BMO Capital in 2010 that I just quoted showing that executives are accepting of online education. Maybe the hiring people are not as much, but certainly the executives and top officials are. And as I said earlier in our recent study in New York City, all 99 of the Fortune 500 out of 100 would allow tuition reimbursement to go to online education.
And then Cindy Carter, she says, we are a Hispanic serving institution. Have you disaggregated the results to address their specific needs?
Well, was it 13% were Hispanic? I think that was right. Of our survey, she means about the survey?
Yes, the survey overall. Have you made any?
No, we had not, because we did not think 13% was a large enough cell size of the 1,500. It would only be about maybe 200 people. Well, we've worked with that before. We haven't done that. We might look at that, yes.
And another question that is sort of similar to, I think, you know, looking at the data, splitting the data up in different segmentations. What percentage of the concerns about online learning are from people who have enrolled versus those who are currently enrolled, especially in the area of inconsistent, poor contact and communication with instructors?
That's a good question. I've thought of that same question myself, but we need to look at the data and break it out by the students that we're thinking about enrolling in the near future or that have already enrolled, because you would trust the opinion more of the students who have already taken online classes. But we don't present that here, but we could look at that.
Yeah. But the large majority, 2/3 or 70% in the last 2 years were enrolled or currently enrolled.
And then another question that came from Cindy is, when the notes are distributed, would you include information about which of the statistics are significant?
We will try to do that.
Well, it would help folks to know, too, that the margin of error in the survey is 3%. So when you see differences larger than that, you can assume significance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And you know, if there's really nothing in these data that stand out as terribly weird or unacceptable. Does anyone see any pattern that they don't think is somewhat reasonable? Yeah, they want degrees in great numbers. They want a reputation and lower cost. They study closer to home than not. There's nothing really weird about this pattern of behavior. Now, that's because probably we do 30 studies a year, and I've got other things to compare it to, but I'd be interested in anything that somebody says, I just cannot believe that.
Yeah, for example, folks, when I saw the data on age, I was kind of taken aback, and I kept pushing Carol And we did some checking with colleagues, as she said, at large institutions, and they're seeing that same trend, that significant number of students 24 and under is pretty common, and so we have confidence in it. These data too, you know, the difference between if 52% of the students wanted career placement as a key feature and 58% wanted something else, I don't think that's a good use of the data to try to distinguish between items on a question like that. You want to look at the aggregate, see themes across especially multiple questions, like the career placement one, for example. That's an important service. It ties in with the other findings about why students go back to school and the majors they're interested in. So you can have some confidence that a move to improve that service is probably going to pay dividends for you, or at least if you have a good service, to promote it in your communication to students.
Okay, and then Becky Taylor, I think she just wants your opinion. Do you think that the preferred length of program is true for courses offered on campus as well?
Yes. You know that's true. Even with traditional age population, anytime an institution decides in January or May to offer a 4-week course, they get bombarded. It's likewise in summer. The 6-week courses are highly desirable. The shorter the better, the more compressed. Now, I'm talking about people typically 25 and older. Although I can see we have a quarter of the population here who also like it, but typically people 25 and older in all our studies, it's 8 weeks, and that's about the, you know, it could be 7, maybe 9, but, you know, safe to do it in 8, and then you've got 2 8-week blocks into a standard curriculum, and it makes your registrar pretty happy.
And then Christine Shelley is wondering how many schools are represented in the 1,500 student survey.
Oh, we have that number. Oh my gosh. Hold on, Dave, answer something else, and I'll go find that number.
You go do some homework, and yeah.
No, I got it right here.
Okay, Dave, here's a good question, and I think, again, this is just sort of your opinion. From Maureen McCormick, does this data about location also hold true for students who attend school on campus, the 80% within 100 miles? I'm wondering if the statistic is true both online and on campus.
Yeah, I would not make that conclusion. I don't think that's safe. You'd want to ask a different, you know, set of students. I saw a report recently, I think, from ACT about the number and the percentage of students and the type of student who go out of state to go to school. Yeah. And as I remember from that study, students that score higher on the ACT exam are more likely to go out of state to go to school, for example. So there's a whole different, I think, demographic around high school graduates, 18-year-olds, and where they select to go to school. And I don't know of any other studies that focus on that population that may be the ones that would travel to go to a traditional campus. So I wouldn't draw that conclusion necessarily.
Well, the answer is, Carol, the answer is 700 to 800 institutions, about 750.
And then related to location, Daria Petrova is just sort of making an interesting comment. 18% of students select a location closer to their home. That's interesting since online degrees, for the most part, are offered throughout the U.S.
Yeah, I mean,
well, but
in the early days of online education, we would get students, you know, that were 50 miles from any campus or living in odd places. That was a certain group of students that just couldn't get to a physical campus for their regular programming. Although you'd also find students in major metropolitan areas that had lots of institutions nearby, but would prefer to go online for convenience factors, schedule factors, all kinds of reasons. But yeah, you can get an online education from virtually anywhere in the world if you have internet access, but there's still a strong preference for a nearby physical presence of some type.
Okay, and then Liz O'Neill has a question which might be better answered at the September financial aid webinar, but she asks, for the purposes of financial aid, how is full-time part-time student status determined when semester length is abbreviated or programs are designed to be completed one course at a time?
Well, the answer is you have to check with your financial aid regulations. They have guidance on what's considered a full-time student. In an 8-week term, I know that you need to take 2 courses minimum every 8 weeks to be considered a full-time student. You'd be a part-time student if you're over 50% of that, which would be 1 course per 8 weeks. But you have to look at your term lengths and the number of credits in the courses, and the financial aid regulations do have precise definitions about that.
And then David File had a question about the key trigger events. He asked, what about change in health, and also will the influx of returning military personnel alter these trigger events?
Yeah, change in health, not as prominent as jobs, but I remember back in the 1980 study that health was a major domain of triggers, but not as much as career and family changes. Health was another arena with career, family, health, location. And with the, 600,000 military returning, that could change next year's figures.
I think that might be it. Hold on. Let me check. Oh. Lewis asked about if we asked about entrance requirements.
Wasn't that one of the items on the list of what's important and not? Let me see.
The actual question was about ease of admissions, paperwork, and application processing. I don't recall that we asked a specific question about if the entrance requirements were higher or lower, would it make a difference for a student?
Right, we did not ask that question. I'm just seeing how they ranked that ease of their concerns. Well, it was a question about concerns about online education, and one concern we offered them was fulfilling admissions requirements. And 27% had a concern about that. But I think you might be saying entrance exams as well, which we did not ask about, like does taking the GMAT make a difference in entrance to a graduate online program? But we could go into that next year.
Wendy, I'm looking at the chat format here. I see a question about U.S. News and World Report rankings.
Well, we do have more questions, but go ahead and you can read that one, and then I'll get to the other one.
Yeah, the question is, what organizations provide rankings of online programs? And the U.S. News and World Report began this year their initial ranking of online programs, so you could go there if you want to. I have serious reservations about the methodology they use and how they determine what they say is a good online program, but that's the only one that I know of.
And Shannon Johnson, she's wondering, do you have the data on graduate transfer credit?
No. No, we did not ask graduate transfer. That's a good question. We should have done that. We could do that next year. I do want to go back to one of these other questions. It is not that 80% are within 50 miles. It's that 80% are within 100 miles, and it's a campus or service center.
And then Rhonda Lubert has a question, and she's not the only one that asked this. Was there a distinction made in the questioning between online courses and hybrid courses? Did those surveys understand the difference?
Oh, no. No, these were fully online programs. They were not hybrid. There was no classroom instruction. The total and it had to be not a course. They could only have enrolled in a degree program, in a degree certificate, in an online degree program, an online certificate program, or an online licensing program. They could not have been there was no classroom part of this. And that's the 2.5 million individuals that now make up this population. Out of 21 million college students in the United States, 2.5 million, or about 10%, are fully online students. 6.5 million out of the 21 million take one or more courses online. We did not study that population. We only studied those who were fully online.
So Carol and Dave, I think that's all the questions that I've saved up now. There are been several questions about the PowerPoint and recording of the webinar. So the PowerPoint will be emailed to everyone with a survey about the webinar within the day, and the recorded webinar will be up at learninghouse.com/resources within a week.
Wendy, thank you for...
We did get a couple of extra questions if we have time.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay. So Sophia Ferris, I have a question on how the online course withdrawals are being addressed and a way to reduce them.
That's a great question. That's the $64,000 question, is how to help students feel the need not to withdraw or drop out of online courses. And, you know, there's lots of answers to that question, but there's implications throughout many of the things that we've said today. I'll go back to the point I was making about faculty participation. If faculty are highly engaged in a class, asking penetrating questions, if they're in the discussion boards frequently encouraging students, giving strong feedback and extending the learning, it's going to make the student a lot less likely to withdraw. The quality and design of the courses are important, and the way the course is organized and built and the information around it, the use of technology can all help. But services like the shorter term lengths and the opportunity to interact with other students in the program, there's clues in this study about how to improve the quality of the experience for students so they retain at a higher rate and pursue through to graduation, which is everyone's goal.
And then we have a question from Daria Petrova. Are all of the students who participated in this research U.S. citizens?
I don't know, but they were all residents of one of 47 states, and we found, yeah, I don't know. But I would guess 98% probably were, if not more. There was a question here about the global market for online higher ed degrees. And I know that the Education Dynamics has a new portal called, what is it? Not international, it's universitiesabroad.com. And it's been very, very popular with people overseas that are looking for online programs so that they don't have to leave their countries of origin. You might look it up, universitiesabroad.com.
We'll take a few more minutes here. There's still a lot of people that are logged into the seminar to see if anybody has a question that you want to shoot off at us.
Okay, I think David File has another question. How would you combat the perception that online cannibalizes the residential population?
That's a question that we get just about every week at the Learning House as we work with our partner institutions. There's always that concern when an institution starts online degrees for the first time. If you're only offering face-to-face programs presently and you give those students an option to move to online classes, a certain portion of them will move online because it's more convenient and it fits their lifestyle better. At the same time, you will enroll new students that you wouldn't have had enrolling because you didn't have that opportunity for them. So the students will shift, some of the students will shift, and you'll pick up a new group of students that wouldn't have attended your institution. And always like to remind people that, as the one questioner said earlier, programs are available anywhere in the country. Students are going to leave your program and do an online program regardless of whether you offer it or not. They'll go to one of the other institutions in your area or one of the national institutions. So you're already probably losing students that are transferring from your on-ground program to an online program, or you're missing the opportunity to enroll those students. So Wendy, how are we doing?
I lost you. I didn't hear you talking for a little bit, but now you're back.
I'm sorry. Did you hear me finish the question, or did it cut off in the middle there?
I think we got most of it.
Okay.
David
Well,
and
like,
Carol, I'm not showing any more questions, but on my end.
very good. It looks like people are starting to sign off in larger numbers. Well, Wendy, again, thanks for helping host this. Carol, appreciate working with you, and thank you to everyone who attended. We appreciate your interest in this particular topic, and if you want more information about the study itself, beyond getting a copy of the presentation and the report, you can contact either Carol or myself, and we'll be glad to respond to further issues, data questions, and so forth.
Great. If we did get one final question for you and Carol, do most colleges offer the same price per credit hour online as on campus?
Yeah, in our experience at the Learning House, it's typically the same price. There are a few institutions that add a technology fee on top of the online tuition, or an additional fee for online students, but that's not the majority of institutions. The common practice is same tuition either way. So I think that will be our last question. Again, we'll sign off at this time. Thanks everyone for participating. Thank you, Carol and Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.